my darkest memories now let me fall back. But you'll be there, ready to rescue me if I go out of track. We can get away with it. 'Cause you make me love my imperfections, answer all my questions, just to show me what's on the other side of inhibition. No apologies, my baby. I do it all 'cause I'm feeling so good.
Lonely in my room again, trying to find the words to say, but nothing comes out. I am looking for the better days, seem like they just stay away whenever I try. There's so many things that I keep in my mind. My friends keep me out and it hurts every time. With all the emotions I built up inside, oh why can't I? Will someone look for me if I disappear? No matter how much that I scream, nobody hears. But I see the light from far away, it's down the line. Maybe I should not give up without a fight, 'cause there will be a time. Oh, 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 oh. There will be a time. Oh, 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 oh. There will be a time.
locked onto the phone. And I wished I'd had a number so I could be color unknown. And then I tell her to look into my eyes and never let it go. Somebody to show the way. Yeah, I was a heartbeat with no sound till you came around. Yeah, you showed me colors, light in the darkness. You were the only thing I needed. Then we got older, but we stayed the same. Swear that we never lost the flame. Nostalgia, you're an echo in my head. Oh, nostalgia, like a symphony of our memories. Oh, nostalgia, don't you ever slip away. Oh, nostalgia, like a symphony of our memories. Oh, like a symphony of our memories. Oh, what if the years turn into gold? The longer we live, yeah, the more we grow. We could be 100 miles apart, but it's never far. Yeah, you show me colors, light in the darkness. You were the only thing I needed. Then we got older, but we stayed the same. Swear that we never lost the flame. No, nostalgia, you're an echo in my head. Oh, nostalgia, like a symphony of our memories. Oh, nostalgia, don't you ever slip away. Oh, nostalgia, like a symphony of our memories.
Alrighty then. So today, what I've got for us all is a video by someone who thought he would give me a little bit of shit online, particularly today. And you know what? I'm someone who is thoroughly appreciates political discourse and having a conversation with others, particularly those I disagree with about it on X of all places. But of course, he decided he would come out and have a go at me about the various different political ideologies I hold, which he has no idea how to articulate. But it did get me interested. What is this guy's views? What has this guy got to say? And funnily enough, I stumbled upon the first video that popped up for me of his, and I thought it was fascinating because it's a It's not a right-wing individual's take on why the separatism movement in New Zealand is going to fail miserably. And whilst there are a few things in here I agree with, there are other things in here which I thoroughly disagree with as well. And that's more or less why I want to go into them. But before we do that, I just need to check a couple things, and then we'll do so. How many people we got in here? We got 37. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I have been trying over the last few days and weeks to slowly streamline this interface I got going on. Simple's better, as they like to say. So streamlining it quite a bit. I also launched a Patreon at the moment. Mostly free stuff, just for all my polls and all of that sort of stuff. You can go get them all in one place. Makes it much easier to look at. Even for myself, it's a good way for myself to have everything stored away on a particular place where I can go back and reference them easily, as well as share to others easily if they ever want to. But particularly with a lot of my with a lot of the US based stuff, there are certain things there that I'll post exclusively there. And stuff like that. And also, I also am planning on doing other bits and pieces in video format that will be exclusive to there as well, as I just try and kind of divvy up my things here and there, because I do want to make all this stuff worth my while. I don't want to just do it for the sake of it, because ultimately, it takes up my time. Even today, I've spent about 5 hours doing stuff, all related to this. So, a lot of time and effort goes into it. So I'm trying to just branch out a little bit and see how we go. But getting into this, let me know what you think along the way as we go. I found it rather fascinating.
I keep seeing people advocating for radical pro-Maori policies. Whether or not these policies are actually pro-Maori is debatable, but that is not what I want to speak about here. I want to speak about the seriousness of these proposals. These radical pro-Maori policies that I keep seeing people advocate for. A separate Maori parliament, a separate Maori law, giving Maori total control over New Zealand, giving Maori total control over most, if not all of the land in New Zealand. These radical pro-Maori policies. I think that most of these policies are undesirable, but I also think that arguing about their desirability is almost a waste of time, because these policies will never happen. They are politically unviable. They are a pipe dream. They will never receive the level of popularity needed for such radical policies to be introduced.
And this is the interesting part where I think he starts off, is his position is that we don't need to worry about these things. You don't even need to talk about these things because they will never happen. Based on the idea that because they are politically unpopular, they will not happen. Well, I'll give you an example of something that was politically unpopular. He Puapua, that was politically unpopular. That doesn't mean that He Puapua wasn't commissioned. That doesn't mean that the people responsible for producing the report did not do what they did and produce it to recommend what it did. And that did not stop the Labour government of the time beginning to implement elements of those recommendations from the report. That did not stop the Labour government implementing things they'd never campaigned on in the first place. That did not stop the last Labour government from implementing things like race-based decision-making in our water management. Having a not technically separate but separate health system, or part of our health system which caters directly to one ethnic group. Right? That's exactly what they did. So it doesn't need to be politically popular for it to be a risk. And they don't need to campaign on it in order to implement it. Now, of course, in the long term, that would be political suicide, to implement something you never campaigned on, which would be, repugnant to the majority of voters. But if you have no intention on caring, and you are looking to entrench a completely new system, then, at the end of the day, you are getting what you want across the line that it makes dramatic reform in the way things work. And then you can maybe sit out for 3, 6, 9, 12 years until people have a short memory and forget about it, right? I mean, let's be honest. What did the last Labour government do? An absolute shit ton, which all of us really have been negatively impacted from. That's not going to stop half the population voting for them over the next 3 to 6 years. Well, at least a good 30 to 40%. That's not going to stop them having 40 to 50% of the support. Being that the opposition with Labour, Greens and Te Pāti Māori. As of right now, their average support is sitting around 42, 43% of the population, with the government only sitting around 53, 54. So despite all of the damage that we went through as a nation over the last 6 years, we're still going to have large portions of the population supporting those who did the damage. The amount of damage that Te Pāti Māori have done with actually really no power over government at all in the last 3-4 years has been dramatic. They've actually managed to convince people that we should be having a discussion on race and that we should be considering having 2 separate systems, that we should, funnily enough, support racism, whilst also telling us not to support racism. That's the whole messy deal with Te Pāti Māoris. Their whole position's a little bit incoherent. How dare you be racist, also support our racism? That's Te Pāti Māori in a nutshell. So it leaves the question, is there ever going to actually be a threat of the policy that Te Pāti Māori hold coming into fruition? Well, I suppose a lot of that is predicated on, or dependent on, what Labour decides to adopt from an ideological perspective, or what the dominant left-wing party decides to adopt. Because we know the Greens will get behind a lot of what Te Pāti Māori say. They can 100% get behind the idea of race-based systems. I mean, Labour started implementing exactly that. Now, of course, you could argue that the Labour Māori caucus is very much compromised and basically just a infiltration of Te Pāti Māori's ideology into the Labour Party. But I think it's a very valid concern where we look at what Labour is proposing in the last election, or what they had done up to that point, what Te Pāti Māori are proposing and what the Greens are proposing as a way forward for this nation. And we have to realise they have become very radical compared to 6, 12, 18 years ago. Very radical by comparison. So the idea that it would be completely out of the question that they would decide to implement something that is consistent with the extreme pro-Māori policy that this guy's talking about, it's not out of the question. It's never out of the question. And unless we speak about it, it may very well come upon us faster than we may think. And that's why winning the last election was so important. Because without doing that, there is no knowing just how bad of a position our country would have been in 2026.
They will never receive the broad public support that they would need to be implemented. Politically, these policies are just completely unviable. They have no potential for broad public support. They are not serious proposals. Major constitutional and economic policies like these can never be achieved without massive public support. That level of public support will never be secured because these policies are not even remotely appealing to the average person, and they never will be. Even many Maori find these policies to be laughable. You will never get the average Pakeha to back them. And if you cannot get the average Pakeha to back them, they have no political future. Because Pakeha are the majority, and they hold disproportionate power on top of that.
And yes, he makes a very good point here, and I do apologise, I am just trying to pull up the chats that I missed. He does make a valid point here of the Pākehā are the majority. But when a majority of the Pākehā are very mixed in their opinion on these matters, that raises a kind of a concern behind that argument. But quickly, before I address that, I'll address these questions. Vikash says, you should make more vids. I don't usually watch streams. You can clip parts of your stream. Yeah, 100%. I do tend to clip parts of my stream now. And Bakash also says, oh yeah, I remember from here, Puapua from 1920, it was huge back then. Yeah, it was. And it was so huge that the government had to go into overdrive trying to deny that this was policy and all that sort of stuff. And technically it wasn't policy, but when you go and adopt a bunch of the recommendations, well, I don't really care what you have to say. Te Moana John says, the problem is only the Maori elitists actually vote for them. Most Maori don't support them at all, and that's exactly right. And he does go on to talk about that in this video. It's only a small radical group of Maori that actually support these ideas, but I'll address that. So yeah, that's the situation we find ourselves in. I'll leave that up so that I can reference it as we go. But yes, what was I going to address? I was going to address the fact that, Pākehā are the majority, and so that means there isn't really any threat of this. Okay, the issue is if we were to go look at European New Zealanders' voting habits, what percentage of that majority do you think vote in favour of Act New Zealand First type policies? Right, you're not looking at many. How many support national? You're getting a much larger chunk there. But National are probably, whilst they would never go to this length, they're only one party, and they are still a little bit, what's the best way of putting it? They're still a little bit too keen on some of the co-governance arrangements that have happened over the last 10, 12, 14 years. So, they're not the most anti this kind of policy that there is. If that's the best way to put it. So, we can't rely on National to keep us away from a bad road ahead. Whereas Labour, they're the other main party that gets a good chunk of the European New Zealander vote. And so long as they're getting a good amount of the New Zealand European vote and have the ability to lead a government, we are in a bit of strife here, because as long as a Labour government includes either the Greens or Te Pāti Māori or both, there is a very real threat of more and more extremely radical policies, the likes of which the Greens and Te Pāti Māori advocate for, getting pushed over the line. For example, I mean, it's the literal arguments made every single day. You'd really argue you buy the opposition at the moment as to why there are a lot of so-called unpopular policies being passed under this government. It's because of ACTA New Zealand First, or it's because New Zealand First has been introduced into the coalition because they had no other choice, that they're being forced to implement all this radical policy, all this unpopular policy. Things like expecting that women are able to use their bathroom or their changing rooms without blokes walking in. Those sorts of radical policies. But it's all because our form of, elections, our election system forced the National Party to go into coalition with them, right? So it's like, if it works one way, then it can work the other way. The same argument could apply to Labour being forced to implement some radical Maori policy, Te Pāti Māori policy, because they're forced to work with them in a hypothetical situation that we could find ourselves in 2026, 2029, etc. So the white majority isn't an argument against this happening, because the white majority contribute to the issue, contribute to the conversation. Sure, he goes on to explain later that it's like there are these white saviour liberals, or, just really woke idiots. That's how I describe them. Woke idiots who actually 100% get behind the whole toi tu te tiriti thing. And it's like, you can get behind it all you like. Or that can be a minority as much as you like. But so long as Te Pāti Māori have influence over government decisions, so long as the Greens have influence over government decisions, this is not an idle threat, right? Or this is not a threat that is far off into the future or non-existent. It is a very real threat. Vikash says, in my opinion, a lot of it started with Key. Even Clark was more anti-Māori than him. The irony. Well, yeah, and I think it's more so Chris Finlayson than anything else. If it wasn't a Chris Finlayson, and I think the issue with Chris Finlayson's a bit of a thorn in the National Party's side right now. He makes the current woke National Party look right wing, at least on this subject. So, Chris Finlayson is, I think he's lost the plot on this particular issue. Micah says, especially dangerous now the left have been shown to negotiate cross-party deals, enabling the minor parties to get policies implemented. Yeah, exactly. We know Te Pāti Māori are going to be eager to implement their policy given the opportunity. We know that the Green Party will always take the opportunity to implement their policy given how radical it is. And we know that Labour isn't afraid of implementing radical policy that they haven't even campaigned on. By comparison, National is the safe bet. If you want to, have a risk of some silly Māori-related policy that you might not necessarily agree with, but can be comfortable that they're not going to implement any ridiculous, race-based decision-making powers, then you can go National. If you actually care about people being treated equally based on the very many different things that make us different, then there's only really two parties in Parliament that provide that, and they only make up around 15% of the support. So how's the overrepresent or the ridiculous number they give me? How is the white majority? How is the white majority saving us from radical Māori policy when only 15% of the population, of which include Māori, of which include Pacifica, of which include, our other communities that aren't Europeans, how are they going to stop us from a road taken that is fundamentally anti-democracy, anti-freedom, anti-equality? The argument simply doesn't stack up.
These extreme pro-Maori policies will never happen. Modest co-governance and Maori names for government departments provoked major backlash. Do you seriously think there is any prospect of totally restructuring New Zealand around Maori interests? That is just delusional. I am all for idealism, but at a certain point you have to be realistic and pragmatic. Otherwise you will never achieve anything. The recently elected right-wing coalition constantly criticised modest pro-Maori policies, and they were rewarded with a strong electoral victory. And now some extremists have convinced themselves that radical pro-Maori reforms are probable, if not inevitable.
What's interesting here, right, is he's attributing Nationals or the coalition's strong electoral victory to this issue. I think if we really look at it, there are only really two parties that benefited from that, and you could probably say it was enough to get New Zealand First over the line, and even then, that's probably more of the freedom vote on other issues, and it was enough to bounce ACT maybe 1 or 2% because of the referendum, right, or the proposed or the intended will of a referendum. If we get there, let's hope we do. So we're looking at maybe 3% if we're being realistic. That voted specifically to target this. Now, of course, that's just a guess, but specifically to target these kinds of issues. Because if you really cared about these issues more so than anything else, ACT or New Zealand First were your safest bets the last election, right? And if we then look at National, really what they had going for them was how terrible Labour were. Economic management, non-existent. Therefore, National has a record of being okay. The last time our economy was really in a good place, it was kind of 2015 through to 2018, and most of that was under National's governance. So National have that record. National were able to say, hey, look, we will get us out of this situation. Obviously you're all suffering from the cost of living under Labour's watch, and so that is really the fundamental driving factor behind their electoral victory, on top of things like crime rates and so forth. So we can't sit here and say that it's this issue, because this issue was really something that National spent the good majority of the election campaign trying to steer clear of. They weren't interested in discussing it where it could be avoided. And they actively called, the likes of ACTA New Zealand First out on some of these proposals, saying that, or not just these proposals, but other proposals, particularly around things like, gender and so forth. It's out of this world. They tried to distance themselves. They tried to say, oh, all of these ideas pertaining to this issue and issues like gender, they're all a bit silly, or they're not really top of people's mind. And to a degree, they were right. They weren't top of people's mind. Not the majority of people's minds, that is. Certainly not of the camp of trying to have a treaty referendum or so forth, as we can see by the actual election numbers. Only 15% really supported this kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I'll allow it to continue, but he's really struggling here to pinpoint what it is that's responsible for the positions he's actually making. He's relying on a really a falsehood to underpin his argument. So yeah.
It is just delusional. The left needs to focus its efforts on things that will actually happen, rather than wasting time and energy on pipe dreams.
Ah, yeah, and of course, and that's what he also finished off with, as he's talking about pretty much people on the far right. Almost as if those who are believers that there is an actual threat of extreme pro-Maori policy being implemented is something really focused on the far right. I notice he doesn't give any examples of the far right, because personally myself, I've never met the far right. In all of my discussions on this topic, all of my interactions with people on this topic, I haven't seen the far right anywhere. So the fact that it's the far right purporting the ideas I am is also a little bit concerning to me. Surely you guys have seen my political compass. It's pretty moderate. It is becoming more and more right the more and more left they get. And that's one of the other things. The more radical one side gets, the more radical the other side gets. Because to combat the radical, sometimes you feel like you need to get more radical. You get a bit more fed up with things. So it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm fundamentally done with all this nonsense. So I'm going to be a little bit less lenient in my approach to dealing with it. It seems to be the way things go. So, yeah, I mean, the idea is that it's the far right purporting this, that they're the ones that are saying that it's actually a threat, I think that's fundamentally ridiculous. I don't look at Julian Batchelor and think he's far right. I just think he's a guy with a lot of hurt feelings, with more experience that would lead him to pursue the campaign, the tour that he went on, than anyone else. He had means to do so, and he tried to do so based from a factual position, as much of a factual position as he could, given that he had skin in the game, that he had an emotional investment in it. But like, that would mean that Julian Batchelor's far right, that I'm far right, that David Seymour's far right, that New Zealand First is far right. That is essentially what it means. When I was at the Toi Tu Te Tiriti protest several months ago, was I there as a far right extremist trying to cause trouble? No, I was there filming, just watching. Why? Because they were the extremists. Many of them were just there and probably didn't even realize just how extreme what they were supporting were. In fact, I saw a couple of older white women being abused by a Maori bloke because they were there, despite the fact they were there in support. Funnily enough, I didn't get abuse from anyone bar one person who knew me from my online stuff and decided he would threaten me with violence. It's whatever. It's neither here nor there. Doesn't really bother me. But it shows you that they have an undercurrent of extremists that are very much at the heart of their entire movement. I mean, you can't look at Kiri Waititi Tamihere and think, or Tamihere Waititi, and think that she's not an extremist. How can you look at someone like that with the rhetoric coming out of their mouth and say that they're not an extremist? They demand to be viewed as someone who has complete sovereignty. They reject the validity of the crown. They reject the power and the sovereignty of our government. They reject it all. And they expect to be able to establish their own Maori parliament. I mean, this is the other thing. He says that it's not politically popular, and yet is kind of ignoring the fact that Party Maori have already outlined they're not particularly a fan of our system. They're not particularly interested in following our system, our due course, our due process. They don't care. When they announced that they wanted to have Maori be politically independent and that they were going to establish their own parliament, they said they would go away and establish how they're going to do it, or they're going to go away and discuss the specifics. They didn't say that we're going to go away and bring a bill to the parliament and try and get it passed. No, they said, we're going to go away, we're going to talk about how exactly we want it all structured, and then we're going to do it. I mean, does it sound like it matters if the majority care? They're just going to do it. Let's just say tomorrow 900,000 people wake up and decide that they don't recognise the sovereignty of the Crown. They don't recognise the police as those that are there to enforce the laws. Or at least, arrest people when they break the laws. Sometimes. But that's what I mean. Imagine if 900,000 people tomorrow just decided to reject absolutely everything. Now, of course, 900,000 isn't a number that will actually happen because it's only a minority of Maori that actually support it. But let's say 100,000. Let's say 100,000 Maori tomorrow woke up and decided, I no longer recognise the government, I no longer recognise its laws, I no longer recognise the authority of the police, I no longer recognise the health system, the criminal justice system, the tax system, any of the systems. I don't recognise any of it. All I recognise is what my Maori chief says, or the person that we're appointing in charge of our Maori nation, our Maori parliament, all of this sort of stuff, whoever that happens to be. I only recognise them now. What do? Do you lock up 100,000 Maori? Do you? Because, I mean, what are we supposed to do? Genuinely, what are we supposed to do in that situation? Because that's the route they're taking. That's the route their rhetoric suggests they're taking. That's the route their actions suggest they're taking. So, I mean, has he informed himself at all on the very real threats here? And instead of calling those who are speaking up about it the right-wing people or the far-right people, maybe he should acknowledge that these far-left radicals, extremists, are called extremists for a very real reason. A very real reason. Now, quickly look at the chat. Micah says, sounds like the Party Maori don't even consult their own people. By their own, I mean their voters, not Maori, so as a whole. Yeah, I mean, Te Party Maori are on their own vibe. They have I suppose they do take after a little bit of their own culture with respect to how they view hierarchy and so forth. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and try to speak to that. But, I mean, of course, those that are in positions of power within Te Party Maori and so forth are going to have far more influence on what happens, irrespective of what everyone below them says. I mean, they actually sit there, have the audacity to say that they speak for Maori when the majority of Maori don't even vote for them. So, it's whatever.
I am not saying that we should never do things that are unpopular. I am not saying that we should be purely pragmatic. I am not saying that we should never promote radical policy. I am arguing that we need to be at least somewhat realistic. I am arguing that we need to have a basic grasp of political reality. I am saying that radical pro-Maori policy is a politically unviable pipe dream. I also say this to calm down all the racists. Maori will never have total power over New Zealand. It is not going to happen. Take a deep breath, log off social media, and go to the country club.
So, someone who believes that there is a hypothetical, just a chance, that Maori would have complete control of New Zealand in some situation. That is just a view that racists hold. It's just for racists. I do find it interesting. He likes to throw around labels without describing what those things are. Or examples of who these racists are. Sure, he doesn't need to explain everything. I certainly haven't, broken down every single label I've used on this. but he's being a little bit too general. You know, people who raise a threat about extreme pro-Māori policy are far right. Those who believe it's a potential possibility that they try and take complete control are racists. Perhaps they're maybe full control of New Zealand's a little bit extreme, a little bit too far. But the idea that it's not a threat that we have some ridiculous policy implemented which treats people differently based on their race, well, that's not a pipe dream at all. That's not some, that's not some thing that people on the far right made up and will never happen. Elements of that has already happened. So, yeah. Vikash says, problem with Maori separatism is that Maori are integrated with us, they live with us, they don't live in one place, mostly they're not like Native Americans or Native Canadians, etc. Exactly. The thing about what they want to do is they don't want to do it like Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, which is what they've actually based their proposal off, at least based on their policy. That's based on what they've proposed. They want devolved powers. They want the authority given to them from our government to be allowed to create laws and so forth in a variety of different areas, if they have it their way, every area, that only impact Māori. Now, the difference of that with what Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales have is theirs isn't based on ethnicity, it's based on where you live. So if you live in Scotland, those laws apply to you. If you live in Wales, those laws apply to you. If you live in Northern Ireland, those laws apply to you. The Party Māori want to do the exact same thing, but with race instead of location. So if you happen to have Māori blood in you, Māori ancestry, these laws apply to you, the others do not. You are required to join the Māori system, whether you want to or not. Or at least, it's not stated otherwise. It says if you're on the Māori, if you've got Māori ancestry, you go on the Māori roll. That's what it says, more or less. So, yeah, that's the very thing that Vikash points out. That's what they want. They want to be able to dictate the law and the systems that someone uses based entirely on who their ancestors were. That ain't viable, but it's what they're planning on doing. It's what they've been advocating on doing, and it's exactly what they've managed to get tens of thousands of people around the country to march for. The majority of whom I doubt even think that's what's happening. But that's what they want.
So many right-wingers seem to think that we are on the cusp
Oh, and good afternoon, Mr. Simon Anderson. How are you today?
of some kind of pro-Maori revolution. This is just utterly delusional. This is because the right has no serious solutions, so they are reliant on mindless fear-mongering.
Mindless fear-mongering. Reminds me a lot of the left, actually.
The Maori Party is powerless, and in all likelihood, they always will be. Unless they drop the mindless extremism and start acting like adults. That is how they became powerful in the past. The current path of extremism is good if you like passionate protests, but it will never give you any real power.
What is the most number of MPs that the Māori Party had prior to its Te Pāti Māori rebrand? Unless I'm mistaken, it was like 2, right? I mean, the most prominent time where they had the most influence would have been under Key Era, right? Would have been under the Key Era. And how many MPs did they have? 2. They've now got 6. Now, I know this is entirely because of the Māori role, the Māori electorates, right? Entirely because of that. But they still got 3% and 6 electorate seats. I mean, clearly it's resonating with enough people on the Māori roll. And that should concern you. That really should. Simon says, great to see you here to everyone else here. That's great. Easy is. But yeah. So, I mean, what he's saying. Simon says jump, everyone. But yeah. So yeah, it's not really stacking up this whole idea that they don't have power unless they drop, or they won't have any influence again unless they drop the extremist stuff. The extremist stuff has made them 3 times more powerful or influential than last time they were in any sort of realistic position of power. I mean, it wasn't a dramatic swing in support from National to Labour or just New Zealand First not making the threshold for the Te Pāti Māori to actually have a place potentially in cabinet. So yeah, let's slow down on the they don't have any influence ideas.
The extreme policies will never be implemented. They are a total pipe dream. Often these policies are just about virtue signalling and exciting the base. Often these policies are just about role-playing revolutionaries and feeling like radicals.
I mean, it's not that much right. And that's what I mean. Yes, some things are right. They 100% are just role-playing revolutionaries. And that's what they are. But sometimes, when the political climate is right, role-playing as revolutionaries is very effective. And that's what they're doing. They've spent many, many decades, right? There's been, throughout academia and throughout politics in general, there has just been a slow shift towards narratives that support this radical agenda, that support this radical idea. And so long as that's maintained, so long as academia is still convinced that Māori never ceded sovereignty, that majority of the things that are really the basis of what Te Pāti Māori are advocating for, the more and more of a threat that becomes, the less and less radical it will seem to a larger portion of the population, right? Many people don't view what Te Pāti Māori are advocating for as radical. They view it as justice. Because we've got more and more people who lack the ability to think for themselves, just adopting whatever the left says. As long as it has, oh, it's justice next to it, we'll support. That's why you get the silly old sausages with the Ukraine-Palestine trans flags in their bio, right? Because they can't think for themselves. Salad for Hire asks, what are we talking about? So we're talking about extreme pro-Māori policy in New Zealand and whether or not it's ever going to actually be implemented. No name, no shame says a community functions the best when all parts are included and differences are celebrated. If Māori are so set on separating themselves from the nation, let them. They are in for a hard lesson. Vikash says 23 election was basically a repeat of 2017 election with right wing getting 3 or 4% more than 70. Exactly. The only difference was New Zealand First is never going with Labour this time. So who is the person I'm playing, Simon? So who it is a guy called Paul Politic. He's been giving me shit, so I thought I'd go and break down his videos. A little bit petty, but it was actually a very good subject, very good thing to discuss. So took the opportunity. Breaking down his stuff. He's a fascinating character. He explains himself. He's opposed to this stuff, this pro-Māori, extreme pro-Māori policy. He understands it's radical. It'll never happen. Co-governance is a bit ridiculous in many of the ways that it's been suggested it's implemented and so forth. So there are some elements of what he believes in that I can get behind. But he wants to engage in political discourse like myself. But if he wants to act like he was today, well then then I'll break his shit down. Let's continue.
They have no serious potential. They are not serious policies. These policies do not have the capacity for broad popular support. They appeal exclusively to a very small minority. Countless Maori reject these policies. They are not popular at all, and they lack the potential to become popular because they are by their nature only appealing to extremely small groups of radical activists. Extreme Maori nationalists and white guilt-stricken liberals. One of the many reasons why I favour class-based solutions to inequality is because these policies are politically viable.
Micah says, considering I got called a colonizer in the lunchroom the other day, it is definitely influencing people. Exactly. It's the trendy thing to do. And you know what? I would be shocked. I'd be shocked to see statistics on the number of young people today versus young people 20, 30 years, even 10 years ago, that would ever dare call someone a colonizer simply because of the colour of their skin or their political view, or who adopt any kind of I don't know, alignment with the Te Pāti Māori kind of agenda, with their intentions. You'd have far more right now than you would have 10 years ago, even more 10 years ago than 20 years ago, etc. You get what I mean? So it's a very deep concern, and it's really because it's entrenched. This kind of narrative has been entrenched in academia for so long. But let's go through. I'm 24. I was in high school 10 years ago. 14 or 10 years ago. That was my second year of high school. And I was doing social studies, which is where we mainly learn about this stuff. And so social studies that year, and then when I was 15 again in my third year, those were when I learned the most about this sort of topic prior to doing it on my own as an adult. Now, learning there, I got a very simple introduction to the treaty in particular. There was no real narrative associated with it, from what I can recall, other than this is what it said. I learned a little bit about like the United Tribes of New Zealand, the flag, and the flagpole being cut down and so forth. But outside of that, I did not learn all that much. And I'm pleased I didn't learn all that much, because it enabled me, when I was doing further study down the line and more research into it, to look at it with a little bit less of a narrative lens. I knew roughly what the treaty said, and then I knew a couple things that happened. I knew that the land wars happened and stuff like that, but I didn't know much else. But now when I hear 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds talking about how their people were colonized so hard that the Maori never ceded sovereignty, this or that, and I'm like, it's been 10 years. How has it shifted so dramatically in 10 years? Why are you learning this at the age of 13, 14, 15, when I was that age, I was learning the pretty much what the words meant. And not even that, just understood that there are words that go along with why we're where we are, and that it was signed. No narrative. Maybe it was just my school, but there was no narrative. But now there is a narrative. And that narrative is poisoning the minds of young people, poisoning the minds of adults, poisoning the minds of those who are forced to do some stupid bullshit Māori course just to pass their nursing study, right? So it highlights the real issue that we have. Unless we can really solve the issues within academia, which is that they're ideologically captured cesspits. If you want to send your kids there, by all means, but don't expect to get your kids back. So, yeah.
They have the capacity to mobilize broad support. They are broadly appealing to people. And they benefit Maori massively because Maori are disproportionately poor. Most of the issues that Maori face stem from disproportionate poverty.
Yeah, so what he's doing here is saying the issues that Māori are facing is more to do with classism than it is racism. And he's actually not wrong. He's actually not wrong. The biggest indicator to me of why Māori are overrepresented in so many negative statistics is the fact that they are overrepresented in lower socioeconomic communities. And what is something that is so far more common in lower socioeconomic communities than others? Crime rates, gang membership, drug and alcohol abuse, all of these things, all of which dramatically influence your outcomes in all the various different areas where Māori are struggling so much. It really actually isn't very difficult to figure all that out, but it doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't fit the narrative. The fact that academia won't even really teach you this. They will say that rather than it being a class issue, it's a racist issue. In fact, it's only racism that is resulting in them being in this, lower class. And so in order to prevent them from being in lower socioeconomic communities, you have to solve the racism, ignoring the fact that they're not in lower socioeconomic communities because of racism, but rather because of class, and then the fact that they are blaming racism on it, resulting in them remaining in those lower socioeconomic communities because they're not actually attacking the primary issue. And that's the thing, right? If you don't acknowledge what is wrong and you try and blame it on something else, you don't actually solve the issue. So if anything, the academics are actually oppressing Māori, but that's my whole thing. Māori aren't oppressed by the white man, they're oppressed by ideology, in this case, left-wing ideology, progressive ideology. They're being oppressed by the very ideology they themselves adopt. They're oppressing themselves. It really isn't that hard to figure out, but it actually takes thinking for yourself, which people aren't a fan of these days. They just aren't a fan of it.
Much of the oppression that Maori face is class-based oppression. Crush class-based oppression, and many of the hideous inequalities will begin to disappear. We can be radical, but we must be at least somewhat pragmatic about it. I do not worry about the more insane proposals too much, because they will never amount to anything. But
Simon says, this poor guy sounds intellectually subnormal and his argument is merely tradition class socialism. Exactly. I mean, you can't listen to his argument right now and not think this guy's probably a socialist. Yeah, he intellectually subnormal. He gives me, what's his face? You know who we're talking about. He gives me Joe Trinder's mates, Samuel Hudson vibes. Let's be real. Gives me Samuel Hudson vibes. But I appreciate it. It gives me something to talk about. And it makes me feel better about myself. Because I'm not a socialist. Honestly. As long as if you're having a bad day, just remind yourself that you're not a socialist and you'll be happy. Unless you're a socialist, and then you'll just be more miserable.
But they risk normalising a racialised radical form of politics. They risk bringing radical racial politics into the mainstream of political discourse. In doing so, creating territory ideal for far-right politics, which is politically viable. My main concern is that they will normalise racialised politics, bring racism into the mainstream, and pave the path upon which the far-right will one day walk. The far-right is much more politically viable as they cater to a powerful majority, not a powerless minority.
Hear that? The far-right's a bunch of white fellas. Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like the far-right's more likely to be elected, with the exception of France, clearly. Simon would know. They're more likely to be elected and then become far-right than be far-right already and then get elected. It really depends, I suppose, on the on how the position the nation is in. If the nation's in absolute tatters because of the left, the far right's probably going to have a good shot just by being, by focusing on a few things that are a little bit more moderate, whilst having a bunch of crazy radical far right shit in the background. So there's that. But the argument he's trying to make is that the more ridiculous the left is, the more extreme the left is, the more the left wants to focus on race, the more likely the right is to focus on race, the more this becomes a race issue, the more that racists basically can control the narrative and then come to power through that being the sole political topic or the primary political topic of the day. Because, of course, as we know, if the right debates racism in any capacity, it means they're far right. It means that they're racists. And so that's just how it is. And that's the most flawed part about his entire position, is that anyone who debates race on the right must be a racist or must be more to the right. Pretty much been the theme of the entire video. It's the left needs to stop being silly, or Te Pāti Māori needs to stop being silly, stop promoting these radical ideas because they're never going to happen. The left is never going to implement these radical ideas because they know they're silly and will never happen, and because they're so politically unpopular. And that the right attempting to talk about it is a bad idea because that just means they're racist. Whatever.
So these radical fantasies on the left are not harmless. Some of them normalise a racial form of politics that is very dangerous. All of them create conditions ideal for far-right backlash. The ridiculous radical pro-Maori policy proposals. The far-right loves this kind of thing. It is the fuel of their movement. It is the kind of opponent that they dream of.
And I will note, yes, New Zealand has a far-right, but do you know what they're called? It's so small. It is genuinely so small that the idea that he wants to make this conversation about really Te Pāti Māori promoting policy which riles up the far right, it just doesn't work with me. The majority of people who are pissed off with Te Pāti Māori are moderate to centre right. Okay? They're centrists who very much have some key fundamental beliefs that they expect whoever they elect to be in alignment with, and that's why they're in the middle. because they kind of swing both ways, and I have in the past. They're people like me. They're people like the majority of people who will watch this video who aren't far right. Maybe they are right. Maybe they are conservative. Sure. But when it comes down to it, all they want is for a nation which is not racist. A nation which does not create race-based systems, race-based decision-making. All of it is based on ideas which are in themselves not radical in any way whatsoever, but that we're told it's radical to oppose. That's why it doesn't make any sense. When the majority of people who take issue are not the far right, but those who are very normal, who have very, very moderate views. You cannot gaslight us into thinking that discussion on this is only fueling the far right, that the only people who could possibly have an issue with it are the far right, and that Te Pāti Māori are just silly wannabe radicals who are playing a game for no real reason.
It is great for promoting their own hideous views and winning support for their disgusting movement.
And this is the thing, is I'm genuinely sitting here trying to think, what individual in this country that is in any position really advocating for a political movement, political party, is sitting there promoting political views, political policies that are inherently disgusting, that are repulsive, that are actually racist. I cannot think of a single person anywhere. I can't say I've seen a single person in a position of political influence who is connected to a political party, political movement, or a political party or a political movement that is sharing views consistent with anything like that. So again, that's why I want to say, why are we making this a discussion between the extreme pro-Māori policy that you believe will never happen and the far right, which no one knows about? We acknowledge they exist in a very tiny subsect somewhere, but that no one really knows about at all.
It makes the left look like a bunch of crazy radicals who have no interest in realistic, pragmatic policy making. The left needs to focus our efforts on things that will actually happen, rather than wasting time and energy on deluded pipe dreams. In my view, many of the proposed extreme pro-Maori policies are undesirable. They are divisive, they fail to address underlying issues, they fail to account for various factors, they make naive assumptions, they normalise dangerous forms of politics. They are bad for everyone, including Maori. But this debate feels like a total waste of time, because above all else, these policies are just unviable. It is like arguing about what dead world leader should be revived to lead New Zealand. It might be an interesting conversation, but it lacks any serious political potential. We need to focus on practical pro-Maori policy that is politically viable. Putting an end to poverty would be a good start, because radical class-based policy does have the potential for broad public support. We must adopt practical strategies for eliminating the grotesque inequalities that plague our society. We must abandon the radical fantasies that will never amount to anything. The radical fantasies that serve only to make the left look deranged and idiotic. We must abandon these radical fantasies.
Did you hear that, everyone? The solution to all our issues with Te Pāti Māori is just to adopt socialism. Problem solved. Problem solved. So if you're wondering who that is Paul Politic, 400 subscribers. And hey, he's got a lot of stuff here. That may be interesting, if for nothing else but a chuckle. That was certainly very insightful to kind of pick the brains of someone who is very much in a different position on the political spectrum than I. But yes. Allow me quickly Taste of Rust says 70 people. Yep, that's great. Thank you all who are tuning in. Very much appreciated. Joel Terry has posted Auntie Hey Hey's status. Well, it's Auntie Hey Hey, so I suspect it's of some value to anyone who looks at it. Looking over at TikTok, that chat's going a little bit wild right now. Honiwata Mokus, and then your name cuts off, sorry. So Hornia says, just need to shut the government down. Disagree. Tane Gurnick says, bah. Of course he does. Bert says, read the Attorney General's new prosecution guidelines for Māori to be dealt an easier system. I probably should do that. Tane Gurnick again says, they are holding 6 of the 7 seats and I'm only watching, bro. Of course, this goes back a little while. I wasn't checking that chat as we went along. So thank you everyone who participated there. Star says, mate still talking crap, of course. If you don't know, TikTok is my, basically it's my little hub of haters. They love me. Rainbow King says, happy Columbus Day, bro. Is it Columbus Day? I wouldn't have a clue. Bert says, elite under political climate paid Māori researchers to produce some biased outcome to save their careers. And that'll, of course, be in relation to He Pōpua, and I fundamentally agree. And Joel Terry says, hi, how you going? How you going, Joel? Micah says, don't need pro-Māori policy. This assumption that all Māori are struggling is so detrimental to Māori. Exactly. And I know so many Māori who are doing just fine. Bert also said, entrenched or say it often enough, then it becomes fact. It's to do with lifestyle choice rather than race. I think a lot of the lifestyle choices are dependent on your ideology. And if you have an ideology which promotes victimhood, that promotes the idea that racism is to blame for all your issues rather than just the fact that you didn't necessarily start off in the best place in life, then you're more likely to die just where you started. Absolutely nowhere. Joseph says, hi, bro, and how are you going? Right back at you. I'm doing very well. How's your day going? So everyone that was wondering, I've got 70 on YouTube X and Twitch, as well as 85 total over on TikTok. So that's really, really great. And it's good to see that TikTok didn't shadow ban this live for once. How useful. Very, very useful for once. But let's have a quick look. What's everyone saying? Joel says, I like your ideas, info, but I wouldn't say use it to come to conclusions just like any other hot take. Hey, look. Karina's very, Auntie Hey is very hot-headed, to say the least. Always good insights. But of course, like anything else, you need a cross-reference. You need to take it into account and then see where to go from there. I certainly learned a lot, and it was so lovely meeting you last year, in particular. So yeah, always worth a follow if nothing else. Joel also says the cure to resentment is gratitude, but try preach that idea on a mountain and see what happens fast. Well, yes, gratitude is very important, and I think also not being hateful. People often say, that they hate something. I very much try and move away from saying I hate things. The language you use is very important. I try not to hate things. I say I fundamentally disagree with something, or this thing really upsets me. On occasion, I'll say I despise something. But I'll never say I hate an individual, no matter what. I refuse to say I hate a certain individual. I refuse to say I hate a general group. Like I can say I hate terrorism, for example. I think that's fair. I hate these sorts of behaviours. I think that's fair. But trying to disassociate the thing that you really oppose, that you take a lot of issue with, from, the individuals responsible, I think that's important. Because otherwise you live with hate in your heart. And hate in your heart doesn't really lead anywhere good. So, for example, I really despise the idea that we would want a nation, or that we have a nation that is supportive of race-based policy. That doesn't mean that I hate the people that support it, that I despise the people that support it. It just means I despise what that entails. And so, yeah, that's where I stand on the despise, hatred sorts of things. But I think it's important that people express that they support these things. You hate gingers. See, that's about the only exception, Simon. That's about the only exception. And according to the criminal justice system, I am a ginger. Apparently, I have green eyes as well. Used to me. Honestly, I could have just walked out there. They had no idea who I was. I'm very much a dark blonde in my old age. When I was 5 years old, 6 years old, my hair was white as a ghost. Basically silver. You could call me Draco. Simon is low-key laying the blueprint for the final solution to the gingers. Well, I mean, at this point, you have to argue that there is probably going to be public support for some trains and some camps for the gingers. They cause more trouble than they're worth. I mean, let's think of notable gingers in the world. Luxon, who's lucky enough to shave his gingerness off. Luxon, Prince Harry. I'm sure a few castles in Scotland might become available. In all seriousness, though, there's a lot wrong with gingers, but mainly the cats. I'm just like, Garfield. I'm a big fan of Garfield. It's the freckles for me. It's just it's a cheat code to a tan. Cheat code to a tan. But moving on, quickly look back at the TikTok. Actually, Joseph's going hard. He says, "I'm doing good. I don't really understand why some Maori don't accept the treaty that was signed hundreds of years ago. I don't really like race-based system too. It's bad." Exactly, Joseph. The thing is, there's a lot of argument about what the treaty actually means, and they try and say, "Oh, what these white fellas say the treaty means is so bad. It's so racist." But when it comes down to it, what it says is that we have a nation established with a government that can create laws for all of us to live under, and that we're all treated equally. What's so bad about that? What's racist about that? And the alternative is they want us to believe that it means that we have two groups of people in this country. We have white people, or we have everyone but Maori, and then we have Maori, right? But at the time, that would have been white people and Maori. And then the one set of laws is over here for the white fellas, and one set of laws over here for Maori. And it's like, how is that a better idea? How is that a better solution? How is that a better world? How is that a better nation? It's simply not. But they want us to believe it is. They want us to believe that the more racist of the situations is the bad idea. Right? The more racist understanding is the equal one. Is the one that treats us all the same. Is the one that treats us fairly in accordance with reality or whatever. Stay in your lane, fascists. Yeah. I struggle sometimes to speak in a lisp without sounding a little bit fruity. Nothing wrong with being a little bit fruity. In fact, I'll say this. I was at headquarters. Thanks for that beautiful establishment, Leo Malloy. But I was at headquarters once with my brother and some others. And I got dragged onto the dance floor by a bloke. That annoyed me. But we're going now. We started dancing. All of a sudden, I could have sworn Artie Sarver was there. But no. Artie Sarver was not there. Just the splitting image of him, who happened to be a bit fruity. And so to this day, whenever I hear or think about headquarters on the viaduct, I think about Gay Artie. What a night, I tell you. Too good. And Gay Artie could dance, I tell you. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Just give us a moment. I'll switch to this for a second. How's the sharpness on this? Seems a bit sharp, in my opinion. That's all right. We'll leave it. Back to TikTok really quick, and we've got Joseph saying, I don't see anything racist on the treaty. Even Acts redefining treaty is not racist. Exactly. And the reason why it's not racist is because the treaty never was racist. And all Act's doing is taking what the treaty says and putting those into 3 simple points that anyone can understand without any issue. And we're supposed to believe that that's not allowed. We can't possibly support that. So yeah. All right, but actually, what I think I'll do really quickly, I'll probably only go for another half hour. But what I'll do is I'm going to bring up Te Pāti Māori's website, because that'll really show you what exactly it is that they are believing in. And it's not good. It is not good. So I'm going to quickly read what they're saying about it. Vid quality looks great to me. Well, that's great, Simon. That's great. I also saw that you were talking with what is it, Alia B or whatever her name is, from Voices for Freedom, etc. Yesterday or the day before. Great stuff. Quickly come back to this. This is Te Pāti Māori's website. Also, Joseph over on TikTok says, all right, man, it's great to chat with you. Hope you have a great one. You too, Joseph. You too. So this is Te Pāti Māori website. They say, no mai haere mai I te iwi. Te Pāti Māori is the assertion of our mana motuhake and our liberation. Our liberation. Never a more radical sentence has been read in New Zealand politics. Let's be real. The assertion of our mana motuhake and our liberation. As a Māori political movement, we are guided by our tikanga and will always fiercely advocate for the interests of our whānau hapu and iwi in Parliament and Government. We envision an Aotearoa hou where tangata whenua, tangata moana and tangata tiriti together will realise the true intent of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The true intent being whatever they dictate it means. Whatever they dictate the intent is, that's the true intent. And unless we learn to understand what they want us to, then we're a problem and they're going to have to deal with it. So become a member, donate, or volunteer. How about no? Featured campaigns. Te Ngākau o Te Iwi Māori, the Declaration of Māori Political Independence. This is the interesting thing, right? Is they very much believe in the Declaration of Māori Political Independence and want people to sign up to it. And I covered it at the time. You know, this was dropped the same day or the day after of the last Toitu Te Tiriti activation, which I was at. And you know, it's rather simple. It's you add your signature to the idea or the affirmation, the declaration of Māori political independence. As simple as to assert Māori sovereignty as affirmed and protected in He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Te Iwi Māori shall establish its own parliament, which will be anchored in our tikanga and kawa, focused entirely on mokopuna livelihood, established as part of transforming Aotearoa into a nation which respects the tinaranga tiratanga of tangata whenua and creates a safe home for all peoples. Now, Joel says, reading these manifestos feel like taking part in your own abuse and long-term battered wife syndrome. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You are not wrong at all. But yeah, I mean, that's what that declaration was for. It was about trying to, probably they want to see what sort of numbers they can get behind the call for this, to try and apply political pressure, probably first off. And this declaration is intended for everyone to sign, no matter what age, ethnicity, or culture. Just get your 1-year-olds to sign it, everyone. Just get your 1-year-olds to sign it. And it doesn't matter who you are. But yeah, that was what they dropped at their last Voice Utility activation. And you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's a very extreme document. It's a very concerning document. And it's not something. It's not something that we can just sniff at or take lightly. So yeah, what else? police? Have they? I'm wondering if they've got their policy actively present. Probably do. Further towards the top. Policy, of course they do. What have we got here? Is it just, why is my internet running slow? Is it because I'm streaming? Probably. But at least my stream's not dropping out like it did last week. That was a real concern for me. Okay, I just had to click another button. The Maori Party believes that Indigenous solutions can help unlock the well-being of our whānau and our nation. Our policies and practices are derived from kaupapa tuku iho, and aim to provide for the well-being of all, recognising that we must improve the outcomes for whānau Māori if we are to be truly diverse, happy and well nation. This is the idea, right? They believe that their way of viewing the world, their way of living, is inherently superior to every other way. That they believe if we implement a Māori-based system or Māori-based processes for everything, that will benefit everyone. And that's just if we ignore elements of what else they want to implement, which may not necessarily implement for all people, but just for Māori. It's a bit contradictory, some of their policy, but there you are. This will go into the whole wanting two systems thing, right? Justice. Te Pāti Māori will establish a Māori Justice Authority, establish an independent Māori Justice Authority, reallocate 50% of corrections, police and courts budgets to Māori Justice Authority, disestablish youth justice residences by 2030, abolish the type and style of prisons by 2040. Scandinavia. See, they want a Scandinavia system, but it's... yeah, we don't have the luxury of a Scandinavia system with how things are. And at the same time, we know they won't implement it in a Scandinavia style. They'll do their own twist on it, which will fundamentally fail. Work with whānau, hapu iwi, and Māori organisations to devolve justice services. Invest in kaupapa Māori justice solutions, muru restorative justice. Adopt all Waitangi Tribunal recommendations regarding justice issues. And the interesting thing about adopting all Waitangi Tribunal recommendations is they can leverage the authority or the influence, the status of the Waitangi Tribunal to implement whatever they want and claim that, hey, look, we're doing it based on what the experts say. As such, the Waitangi Tribunal can look at this and say, we're just going to make some crazy-ass recommendations. Overhaul discriminatory legislation like the Repeal Bail Amendment Act, the raise the age of criminal responsibility to 16, because apparently that was discriminatory. Amend the Clean Slate Act to apply to custodial sentences. Is that for any crimes? Because I might actually take you up on that. Overhaul Misuse of Drugs Act so that drug use is treated as a health issue. So basically decriminalise all drugs. Wipe criminal convictions for drug use and possession. So is that including if you're a dealer? Require police officers to wear body cameras. I mean, fair enough. Stop benefit attachment orders on all welfare recipients and introduce a judgment-proof debtor policy. They're trying to remove all accountability. Disestablish the Independent Police Conduct Authority and replace it with a prescribed list of experienced barristers to have the same investigatory powers. I mean, there are certainly instances where the IDPCA or IPCA, are questionable. But I mean, you just wanted to disestablish it to re-establish it with more hand-selected people that probably fit your agenda. Let's be real. Uphold human rights in prisons, expand rehabilitation and recovery services for people in prison. I mean, literally what the current government's doing. Guarantee minimum entitlements for people in prison are upheld. It's happening anyway. Increase the steps to freedom payment to $1,000. Yeah, so instead of your $360 when you get released, here's $1,000 and whatever. It's these tiny things that won't really make any difference. Reinstate the right for all whānau and corrections facilities to vote. That's a difficult one. I'm on the fence about it. Having known how people in prison want to vote, I oppose it, simply because they want to vote in order to get less accountability. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation, that one. But quickly, Joel Terry says, using a beret in your voting campaigns is a good grift, and I respect the hustle. Yeah, it's a hustler, right? That's for sure. Ensure adequate accommodation, food, and bedding for all prisoners already happens. invest in community mental health and addiction services, expand mental health co-response teams to shift responsibility for mental health call-outs away from police, increase funding. This is a difficult one because often in mental health call-outs you need police. It's difficult. Increase funding to preventative mental health services and double investment in alcohol and other drug-related prevention, harm reduction, and treatment. The biggest issue I find with Party Maori policy is they don't understand how money works. They think it grows on trees. It's not that easy. It's not that simple at all. So, they want a lot of things to happen which simply aren't financially viable, on top of things which are just batshit crazy, such as their tax policy. But for now, I'll just go to their money more talk policy because this is the policy that matters relative to what we've been discussing today. And so, it's their mana motu haki policy. And it says, there is a new generation of tangata whenua and tangata tiriti who recognise that being forced to work within the system does not suit our struggle for mana motu hake. It is time to dismantle this system so that we can rebuild one that works for everybody. So it's saying, we don't like the government. We want our own government. That's what it says. They'll word it so it sounds kind of, I can get behind that. But it's, we want our own government so that we can dictate how we live. That's what it says. The only way this nation can work is when Māori assert our rights to self-management, self-determination, and self-governance over all our domains. The only way this nation can work is if those things happen. The only way this nation can work is if Māori have complete separation from everyone else with respect to laws and systems. That's the only way. The only way. I'm not sure if I can get behind that, if I'm honest with you. I'm not sure I can. Our vision is for constitutional transformation that rebalances the scales of power in Aotearoa, that restores the tino rangatiratanga of tangata whenua, and truly embodies that was envisaged by our tupuna in 1840. Because they dictate what their tupuna envisaged. They do. Because they're more in touch with every written document on the matter. With every bit of written minutes from all the meetings that happened then and afterwards and so forth. They know. They don't care what the minutes say. They don't care what the facts say. They know better. We don't just talk about land back. We will force the Crown to return our land. We will force the Crown to return our land. It's not just about land back. We will force the Crown. We will force them. Isn't that interesting? Because that's exactly how you get things done in a democracy. You force the government to do what you want, irrespective of what's right. But yeah, I think TikTok, I just keep getting bots, I think. I mean, not TikTok, Twitch, I just keep getting bots coming in. It's whatever, I don't care. Best viewers on streamboo.com. Okay. To Party Māori, this is what they want to do. This is explicitly what they want to do. Establish a Māori parliament so that they can make laws that only happen for Māori and no one else, so that Māori can have different rights and duties under law. Implement all Mātiki Mai recommendations for constitutional transformation. And that's a whole different ballgame if you want to go into us reading that at some point. Remove the British royal family as head of state. How kind of them to want to establish a royal family, establish a Māori parliament, and then make us remove our head of state. Recognise Aotearoa as the country's official name. How about no? Return the foreshore and seabed to mana whenua. How about no? Return all central and local government land to mana whenua. How about hell no? Return all conservation land to mana whenua. We're getting a lot of hell no's. Introduce a first right to refusal policy for mana whenua on all private land. They just basically want to give mana whenua the right of preemption, essentially, although in reverse. In all land sales to foreign interests to be replaced by leasehold estates only. End perpetual leases. How about no? End the fiscal envelope. Insert relativity clauses into all Te Tiriti settlements retrospectively. Definitely no. Make Waitangi Tribunal recommendations binding on the Crown and implement all unaddressed Waitangi claim recommendations. Right? Implement all unaddressed claim recommendations. Make all recommendations binding on the Crown. So, not only do they want to establish their own parliament where they can create laws for their own people, they want to force everyone else, to remove the British royal family as head of state, and then force the Crown to implement things that they want. That impact everyone, not just them. They want to force it. Abolish full and final large natural grouping settlement policies and entrench the Māori electorates. Why would you need to entrench the Māori electorates if you're establishing a Māori parliament? You don't. But this is where it's contradictory. Maybe they could argue, but we don't know if this will actually happen. Okay then. Okay, if that's not going to happen because you know it's not going to happen, don't promote it in the first place because you make yourselves look radical. Legislate for all local and regional councils to have both Māori wards and mana whenua representation. How about no? Because what that's saying is, not only do we want a government that governs over just ourselves, you guys can have your own thing over there, we're going to force you on to do certain things for your own government, despite the fact that we've got our own. And then we're also going to force our way in to have representation mandated on the local and regional council levels. Despite the fact that the local and regional council levels get their power from the other parliament, not your parliament. Okay. Establish a parliamentary commissioner for Te Tiriti or Waitangi to provide oversight of the Crown's annual performance and complying with Te Tiriti. And then set up a watchdog to monitor what those naughty white fellas are doing. You can't make this shit up, honestly. You really can't make this shit up. Honestly, when all is said and done, we know that Te Pāti Māori are a group of radicals who want to take this nation to a place that is more or less irredeemable. That is akin to an apartheid state. Akin to one. In our own unique way, our own unique flavour of it. But that's what they want. They want to see us. And I'll quickly switch to this. Te Pāti Māori want to implement a nation, or implement a system that we follow as a nation, which sees two groups of people. Māori on one side, and then everyone else. Māori have different rights and duties under law than everyone else. Māori have the unique ability to have a parliament designed solely for the land returned to them. And everyone else just kind of has to deal with it. They get to dictate that the Pākehā have to get rid of their head of state, because that's just how it is. The Pākehā need to implement into their systems dual representation at the local regional levels. They want Māori over here to have different rights, different duties, different systems. Meanwhile, they go on the news every other day and call all of us racist. It's disgusting. And the fact that we get gaslighted on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, is quite frankly repulsive. I'm sick of it, and I'm sure many of you are sick of it too. But anyways, everyone, that will finish us off, I think. I'll quickly have a look at the TikTok chat, see what's going on. Thundercat says, discuss, no. Cyro says, so much land is legally owned by English, like it has been bought subsequently. Exactly. Dude, what even is mana whenua? Basically the people of any particular iwi in that kind of land. It's basically people of the land of that particular region, right? More or less. it's like an ambiguous term, so they can just apply it to whatever. Yeah, I mean, they just need to say tangata whenua because that is people of the land, but mana whenua specifically refers to the individual regional tribe, and those who are responsible for those particular regions. As far as I'm aware, you can correct me on that. So yeah, it's whatever. It's not a particularly useful term. No one who wants to actually try and discuss things, and reach a, I don't know, reach a fair conclusion on these topics particularly care. What people want to call themselves. You can call yourself the bloody Manazar, as far as I'm concerned. You can call yourself the Tsar of Tamaki Makaurau. Won't make any shred of difference to me. Thank you very much, Micah. Hopefully that is how you say your name. I will say that much. So yeah, that'll wrap us up. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to go probably record something exclusively for Patreon. It'll be a little bit more lighthearted, I predict. So if you do want to go over to Patreon, you can follow for free, I do believe. But there's only a limited amount of stuff there, like all my polling that you can see for free. Outside of that, it's $5 a month for a bunch of stuff that I will be adding, including early access to things as well as exclusive content. Just to switch things up, get you a little bit more invested. Gives you a little bit more power over what I do with the channel, and the range of other content that I'm doing. So thank you all for tuning in. I'll be back sometime over the next few days.